Alrighty, hello everyone. So if you're new here, because this is a new game I'm doing a video on, my channel is Smuss Daddy. Do not, for the love of God, ask about the name. It's just too painful and too cringy to endure. Basically, I've just started a YouTube channel, and currently my only videos are on Ghost Runner, but Noita is a game I love, and I've been humming and hawing about doing a video on it, and trying also to decide if I did do a video on it, what do I actually have to offer anyone in terms of useful things to say about the game. Ultimately, I decided that I do want to play a bit, and I do want to talk about it, and I settled on trying to more or less describe some of the sort of simple tips that I think people are not necessarily overlooking. They just don't really get talked about that much, which is sort of, I guess, kind of overlooking. But and I think it's good because it gives people the option to sort of find this game's got a lot going on, secrets wise, and so I don't want to spoil all that. I think that's some people are going to be down for that, but other people, personally like myself, I mean, this is why I chose to do it. They want to, see a new game and be good at it. They want to learn little things that can improve, but they don't want to be spoiled for the whole experience. I mean, again, I might be speaking to an audience of one, but it is true to myself. And so, yeah, so the other thing is that I personally have, after exploring a bit, have gone and seen a lot of those videos with, all different bits of sort of very in-depth information, but my knowledge is, not as good as them. And for me to speak about those secrets, it wouldn't be as concise or as clear as it probably needs to be. So I'm not going to go into details like that, and I'm going to try and avoid as many spoilers as I can, even ones that are probably kind of small, and instead just talk about little things that you can do to sort of improve your game. One of them, before I even get into the game, that I wanted to talk about is Game Render's cursor. A lot of people will have this set to off just because it gets a little bit clearer, like it's a little brighter. But the small size, you sometimes do lose your cursor in this game, and having it bigger may be of some utility to, I don't know, someone. The second is cosmetic particle amount. Even if your computer's quite good, you may consider turning this down, because this game does, when things get, pretty intense, that setting might help you some. And other than that, I've just turned down screen intensity, screen shake, because it can be a bit much. And the only other thing is for input. It serves extreme utility to have item in slot 5 set to ignore the fact that this is down. That's just a quirk about how my mouse inputs are working. But this is set to a mouse button for me. So with a single button, I can immediately go to the first item of my 4 potions, which typically is water. Being able to immediately go from first wand to first, if you're good and you can use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you can immediately get to any of these 8 if you're used to playing games that require that, good for you. But I mean, I'm not, but at least being able to get quickly to the first one of each of the 4 is very handy, and I'll sort of cover a little bit about that as we go. But so those are the 3 things before we start. Now, as you go through Noita, each run will start. The world will be randomized. I'm assuming you know most of this. This is just basic stuff. But if you haven't been given a water, it is definitely a consideration to be finding water. Finding water right off the bat is your primary concern most of the time. like finding a flask that it may even be worth pouring out the flask that you start with, just so that you can get some water if you find a pool. Initially on coming down, I tend to go to the right. I used to go to the left, but I found that going to the right gives you access to something which can it can make a big difference to the overall economy you have on leaving the first stage. This is a tip that I've got written down to talk about. Is these little spiders. Be particularly cautious of them, just because they can overlap each other. So you can have a pile of 10, which can each do, I think, 5 damage or 10 damage each, in the space of one. So it looks like just one, and it can actually be an extremely deadly clump of them. I mean, I don't know if it's going to... See there? The way they overlap. You might not have had noticed, you know. And see, yeah, 3 of them jumped at once, and it still looked like they were, you know, don't walk in acid. It's not ideal. But the greed is strong in me. That is another tip, which is very simple. And so if you're starting out, it's something to get into the habit of, is that water, when poured on toxic sludge, not the acid that comes out of these guys, but the pools of lighter green liquid, will neutralize it. And that also means that if you find a big pool of toxic sludge, you can neutralize the whole lot. That's toxic sludge. These guys also produce it, so you can spray it on their corpse so that you can walk on it. Finding a big pool of this stuff, like that pool. So if I was very low on water right now, aside from the fact that I can't get in there currently, I could purify that whole pool and then refill my flask. That is another point to speak on. Holding a flask and having that flask submerged in liquid will refill it with whatever that liquid is. So that's something that I see people like that are very new to the game. They don't notice, because it's obviously the game doesn't tell you much, which is so it's not their fault. But being able to refill your flask is very important, and you should do it anytime you find a simple pool of water. The other thing to note when you refill your flask is that the physical position of the flask on screen, so the witch or she is holding it lower or higher, that will affect. So if it's like this, it's out of the water, it will not refill. If you hold it low, it will refill. And so that can be useful for if you have 2 layers of liquids, like you had, say, oil and then water. You might want to, if you, for example, just wanted oil for whatever reason, I don't know why you would, you could hold it up, and so you would only get what you're after. Or if the water level like this is too low for me to collect water, you can hold it down, and it will fill it up. So can be quite helpful. Another tip is be mindful of where lanterns are. In the first zone, there's a lot of lanterns, a lot of wood, and you can get a surprising amount of clear, because using bombs, I imagine people are probably aware that bombs will blow holes in terrain, much like this is about to. Bombs will blow holes in terrain like that, but being that you only have 3, you want to spare them as much as possible. So if you can use a lantern that you find somewhere to burn through some wood, that's ideal. And you'd be amazed the amount of places you can get just by looking at the position of lanterns. And, you know, a lot of the time you'll find that there's like wood over here and the lantern's quite a long way away, but you can, in the air, kick them and get them to places that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. This leads me on to my next point, is that if you've ever got to move through fire, a lot of people I've seen try to douse the fire. Don't do that. Douse yourself instead. You for whatever reason, putting out the fire, if it's an oil fire, you just won't do it. And even normal fires seem to be kind of tricky to put out. So I think ultimately it's this fire, however, on the guy is definitely a good fire to try and put out with water. Ow! These guys take a lot of damage from big pools of water. So if you can get water on them without dying. Yeah, it ticked. There you go. He stepped in a particularly large puddle of it somewhere, and it ticked for a huge amount of damage. But yeah, basically, see, now I'm out of water and I can refill it. And so, you know, if I was holding the flask up here, it stops refilling basically there, and if I hold it down, it starts refilling again because it's below the level of the water. Something I didn't mention earlier, which I'm just referring back to notes here because I've got a lot of different little things that I wanted to cover regarding the first zone, is that the stats on these wands does randomize to a degree. So you can, once you're a bit more experienced with the game, you can see sort of how your wands are stacking up. But ultimately, your wand is as good as it is. So knowing more than, oh, it shoots like this, probably doesn't really help all that much. So yeah, I don't know. Checking the stats on these is see how you go. So I've mentioned that I come to the right. That is primarily because of this. So this item is a tablet. It does serve a purpose in the game, but I'm not going to speak to it, as that's something that's beyond the purview of this video. But getting it allows you to do something called a trick kill. So anytime an enemy dies in the world to something like, if an enemy dies to another enemy, if an enemy dies to an explosion not caused by like your bomb wand or whatever, if it's an explosion within the world, if they burn to death, if something with enough mass falls on them and crushes them, those are all what the game calls trick kills. Kicking things like this is a good way to achieve a trick kill if you didn't have the tablet. And that is also why there is a cart. Well, part of the reason why there's a cart at the start of the game at the top is because you can kick that cart down the hill, and it teaches you, one, that kicking is useful, and two, it's always good to kick it down as you come through, just because it might come through and kill something on its way down, and it basically takes no time to do so. So you can get a little bonus, and you get double gold basically. So instead of getting 10 gold per nugget, you still get 10 gold per nugget, but you get 2 of those 10 gold nuggets. Okay, this is not a good place to be. On low health like this, trying to talk and play has definitely ruined me. But yeah, I'm trying to sneak over here and get this. So this heart I can't get without burning open this, or breaking it open in some fashion. So I'm going to see if this fire, I don't think this fire is going to catch it. I think I also probably should have mentioned when dousing yourself and trying to put out fires or cleanse yourself of toxic sludge is spray above you so the water falls back down on you, rather than a lot of people like create a puddle beneath them and then jump in that puddle. It's close time-wise, but I think it is better to spray above you. It's what most experienced people tend to do, so I err on the side of saying that, yeah, it is faster to do it that way. And the biggest bit of advice, which I'm currently not heeding, is know when to leave. I should 100% be booking it out of this stage as quickly as possible on this level of HP. But I've got some stuff that I still want to cover, so we'll leave it for the moment. If I die, that's fine. I'll just restart the stage and continue on prattling on about what I'm prattling on about. Yeah, so that covers... I'll show you a kill with this, if I can do it without dying. So that only gave one. A lot of the time, it will give two. Sometimes, and I'm not actually sure why this is, it only gives one. But it genuinely is quite rare. You'll almost always get the proper trick kill. I think it might have something to do with if it hits the enemy on the full, because the game registers that as like you have killed the enemy rather than it's bounced off terrain and killed an enemy. Ow. Yeah, those guys are kind of dangerous. But, I mean, take my word for it. Getting that, yeah, so you can see here, we've still got water. Our bomb wand has been replaced by something that's quite a bit shittier. And our primary fire has been replaced by this spell. And our stats are slightly different. I think I had 17 cast delay initially. I will cover cast delay a little bit later. Yes. So something to keep an eye out for is you'll often see structures in this game that are it's the only way to describe them is they're just like unique looking things. Like it's not a bit of wood. It's not part of the earth like this. It'll be some big sort of object. A lot of the time it's a water tower, like a giant column of water flanked by two wooden beams. Those structures almost always have something in them. So it's always worth, if you see something that looks out of the ordinary, is to suss it out, because there's probably some level of proofing in there. In the case of the water towers, it's underneath them. And yeah, so it's definitely a good idea to check those out. I've spoken to the flasks, I've spoken to the spider stacking, I've spoken about watering yourself and not fire. I've spoken about knowing when to run, which I very much didn't. This is an interesting topic. So, in each of these biomes, which is sort of like the environment before you go through a teleporter and pop out, one level down on a different biome. In each of those, there is there's like a different biome if you progress left, which instead of having to go down and go through the teleporter, if you just go far enough left, you'll enter a different biome just by walking into it. And it is normally harder than the biome you enter. I think it might actually always be harder. In order for me to get into the left biome, I'm now going to have to go down. Also checking out what that potion is. Ow, ow. Oh, it's a broken wand. That can be used for something later, but again, it is outside of the scope of this video. So just going to keep going here. We should be close. Once you get far enough. There you go. Collapsed mines, and you can see there's a different enemy here. So this guy isn't in the normal mines. You won't see him in there. There's also frogs, and I think that's the only different enemies. There's small frogs and big frogs. Fire guys are still here. I think that might be... Oh, and the slime spitting guys and the doggos have a harder variant over there. Now, in most zones, going left... So, for example, on the second zone, going left yields a high density of potions and wands. So, even though it's much more dangerous in the second zone, it's worth getting over there if you've got the HP to do so. I find on the first zone, it really doesn't improve your run that much. If you can go over there, for sure. But the improvement is not that good compared to how you're gonna come out of this stage anyway. So yeah, if you were going to avoid going left on any stage, it'd probably be the first one, because it's just not as worthwhile. And the only other thing I wanted to cover was we need to get into the Holy Mountain to do so. basically going to speak a little bit about what you've got in the Holy Mountain, and then call it good for the video. You will have two sets of options. You'll either get wands or spells. Because wands have spells slotted in them, it's much better to get wands, obviously. You'll always get a choice of 3 perks, a station in which you can re-roll the 3 perks for increasing amounts of money. Leaving will destroy this and you won't be able to come back, which I'm sure you know. These statues are for testing your damage. It'll tally up the full amount of damage you have dealt within 1 second, so it is reading out your current DPS. I've seen some people worried about shooting them because they had health bars. They thought they were going to awaken some sort of monster, but no, that is in fact what they are for. And you'll get a health refresh and a spell refresh. Ultimately, for long runs, if you can, you want to leave these behind if you've got enough health to do so. But for beginners, I would suggest to take them both straight away. Something you can do is you can leave the spell refresher behind until you've bought what ones you want, just so that you can, like for example, you could test out a couple of these and go, oh, okay, so that's what that does, and then refresh it before you leave, so you've got your full stock. There's obviously another test dummy over there, and this board will show you the order of your spells. So I'm going to very briefly cover what the stats are, because I've seen it. It seems to be more confusing than I think it needs to be. And so I'm going to cover, before I do, double-clicking spells adds them to the hotbar. The amount of poor sods that I see dragging these over, and I was one of them for the longest time. Just double-click and it'll add it to the hotbar. But yeah, the stats, I think, don't need to be as complicated as I think they at first appear. So, shuffle wand, no. Ignore the fact that this one says yes. It doesn't matter because it's only got 1 slot. It more or less means, do the shots go in order, or do they go randomly? So when I fire this wand, it will in fact do green ball, firebolt, and then the green ball again. Green ball, firebolt, green ball, because it does not shuffle. If this wand said shuffle, it could be any of them, but it would do one of them, then the next one, then the next one, and then it would reset. So it could be green ball, firebolt, reset, firebolt, or it could be any combination of them. So shuffle wands tend to have much better stats in the early game, just because they're shuffle, and shuffle is considered a negative by the game, and so the stats tend to compensate for it. So they're good for fast shooting things, but that's about it. Ultimately, you want to be finding towards the mid and late games, you want to be working towards no shuffle wands that have decent capacity. So the capacity is the number second from the bottom, just above spread. Capacity 3, that's referring to how many slots it has. You want to find large capacity ones so that you can build something that's, capable of doing a big sort of useful effect. Small ones like this tend to be very simplistic. You might be able to get it to fire very quickly, but because you're not multiplying that by many, many, many powerful effects, it's just going to be a weak damage many times in a row, and so it's not as good. Spread is just accuracy. That's just how wide it is. Spells can add spread as well. This one reduces it, so this makes the wand a bit more accurate. Now, mana charge speed. So this is why I wanted to show it. As I fire, the blue bar in the top right goes down. The speed at which it increases, that is your mana charge speed. And you will not be able to fire a spell. So this spell in the middle there says mana drain 50. You will not be able to fire that if you do not have 50. So these bouncing bursts will be firing on their own once this wand gets below a certain point. See, there's a section there where it's just firing greens, and then eventually then the fire blast come back. That's because it's dropped below 50 mana, and this can no longer fire. So mana charge speed later on becomes a very big deal. Early on, it's not so bad. I'm going to cover something regarding this wand that will make that quite clear. Mana max is just the overall max mana. That can sometimes affect spells. For example, this mana drain is 50, so you need at least 50 in that mana max before you can fire it. So you'll sometimes find wands that have a very low mana max but extremely high charge speed, and that's very strong. It's just it falls off towards the mid to late game because you can't put a strong spell on it. Even though it regens very quickly, you can't put those bigger damage spells on it, which is less than ideal. Recharge time is effectively reload time, if this was a gun. And so the orange bar is you reloading. So you're firing one of the first one, the second one, the third one. That's like your clip, and then it reloads. So top right, that orange bar is it reloading. I'll cover this later, but once you start looking into fixing wands, like you can fix their bad stats, the presence of that bar will be relevant, because you can make a wand no longer need to reload if you can get that reload time, recharge time, below 0. And there are spells that can do that. So example, cast delay is giving this spell negative 0.03. There are certain spells that give recharge time negatives. Getting that low will remove that orange bar. You will no longer recharge. You're effectively not reloading, and all the wand cares about is your cast delay, which is the delay between each shot. So again, comparing it back to guns, that would be like its fire rate between spells, whereas recharge time is reload speed. Spells per cast is just when you click the mouse button, how many spells come out of the wand. Some wands, let's see, this one says 5, so every time you click the mouse, it fires 5 spells, and then 5 spells, and then 5 spells. Can be useful. I typically avoid it just because it complicates things and makes setting the order of things a little bit more tricky. And it's actually something that I need to further investigate because, for example, this spell fires 2 spells at once. How that interacts with firing 5 spells initially, I don't know if it goes up to it's firing 7 in a row, or if this number subsumes this number. I need to look into that a little more. There's probably someone in the comments who can elucidate that. If there's any, well, there's probably no one in the comments, let's be honest. Yeah, and that's all the details about what those stats do, and I think it makes it a little clearer when you put it in perspective with what these meters actually are. A lot of people just explain the term and they leave how it relates back to your interface and how you actually experience that. And so the only other thing I wanted to add is that this is my current wand. It's decent. It's okay. If I had gotten slightly worse stats on this, going into the next stage, I might find that, for example, like maybe I came in here, I was low on money, or I came in here and it was only spells and all the spells were bad. You might need something better than what your current, like, I could have started this run and had this. And it's, instead of firing 3 and then reloading, it's just firing that 1, and then so I've got to have a reload time in between every single cast, and so you might start with that, and that's not really enough to get you through the next zone. So a good option in a pinch is to put it on your bomb wand. This wand is extremely fast, but it has very low mana charge speed. So if you run out, now it shoots even slower than your top wand because it's out of mana. It does not have enough mana to cast this very cheap mana spell. It basically means I can fire one of these every second because the mana cost, the mana drain is 5 and the mana charge speed is 5. Sometimes this wand will randomly have a mana charge speed of like 20. That can be really good. But normally it averages at a 10. It's somewhere around 10, which means you will normally, it shoots so fast that you will run out. If it was 5, like this one is, I would probably just avoid it. But if it's 10, you can make it work with your starting spell for the next stage. You can get it done. It shoots fast enough that you can burst down an enemy and then just, back off a little bit, wait for the next spell, and wait for the next enemy to come in rather, and then burst them down and then keep going. But with 5, it's just too little. And I suppose that's it. The only other thing is there's no real way to know what perks do, so just take them. Once you take one, it does explain it a little bit, and you can read it over here, just like you can read your status effects. So I would recommend just trial and error with perks. Some of them are bad. Some of them are actively detrimental to your run, but just try them and see how you go. Anyway, that's all from me. If you're new here, thank you for checking it out, and I'll see you around.